IT Pro TV, binge-worthy learning for IT teams. Why is it binge-worthy? It's learning presented in an engaging and entertaining talk show format that beats voice-over PowerPoint snooze fests. Watch over 3,300 hours of content in their on-demand library, on your desktop, on the go, or in the comfort of your own living room. IT Pro TV is IT training you and your team actually want to watch, which means a better return on your learning investment. Get started with IT Pro TV for Teams by visiting itpro.tv/Security Weekly and start a 7-day free trial and get 30% off standard or premium IT Pro TV memberships using the code SECWeekly30. Endgame automates the hunt for both known and never-before-seen adversaries in enterprise networks. Built on unique knowledge on the adversary's tools, techniques, and tactics, Endgame's centrally managed agent prevents, detects, and responds to advanced adversaries in the earliest stages of the kill chain without prior knowledge. Endgame, automate the hunt. Welcome back, everyone, to Paul Security Weekly. This is yet another interview segment, and I'm very excited about this interview, as I was the first interview. This is going to be fun.
So an action-packed show, as it were.
Action-packed show. Before we get into it, a couple of quick announcements, which segue in nicely to our interview. Source Boston is May 9th through the 10th. Go to sourceconference.com. Use the discount code SW89AEE2, that's Alpha Echo Echo 2, to get a $100 discount. I like their discount code because I get to do the Alpha Echo Echo thing, and it makes me sound cool, I think.
Well, you get your ham radio operator license and do that a lot, too.
That's right. In my head, I sound cool.
Did you say Niner?
Yeah. SecureWorld is March 19th through the 21st in Orlando, Florida. Save 15% using the code OS18-SW. I will be speaking at both of those conferences, as well as probably a lot of other people who are a lot smarter than I am. The final conference announcement is for SecureWorld Expo happening in Boston. The discount code for that one is Security Weekly, and that will be held March 14th through the 15th. While I won't be speaking there, I will be there conducting interviews with people and talking to all of the vendors, which is going to be a lot of fun. That leads nicely into our next guest, Bruce Sussman, who spent more than 20 years on TV screens as a journalist and certified meteorologist and public speaker. He's been telling stories about InfoSec and cybersecurity for several years now. He is now SecureWorld's multimedia journalist and leads media development at the company. Bruce, welcome to the program this evening.
Hey, thank you, Paul, and guys, good to be with you.
So, Bruce, I have to ask you about being the meteorologist, or weatherman, as we so lovingly call the role. I want to know what that was like and how you went from a job where you didn't necessarily have to be right to being in cybersecurity journalism, where the entire security community is looking at your work and you pretty much have to be right, or they're going to try and call you out on it. So,
yeah, well, nice to get in a little snub there right away on the weather gig. But Paul, I mean, first of all, I was looking for a career where I could be a little more accurate. Right?
Yeah, there you go. There you go.
Well played.
Well played. Well played.
Touche. Actually, the funny thing is I loved doing the weather. I was on the CBS station here in Portland for many years as the chief meteorologist, and it was a lot of fun. And I used to get asked all the time, how can you keep your job and be wrong 100% of the time? My reply always was, I'm only wrong 50% of the time, and that's how I keep my job. So
there you go.
Luckily, the stats have gotten better on that. And, really, IT has a lot to do with it. The computing power now that we have is tremendous compared to what we used to. And so the forecasts, believe it or not, actually are getting better and more accurate. But,
well, I think there's a lot more high pressure, in that area of the region.
Yeah.
It's the best I got.
Is this where you make is that your marijuana joke?
That was my marijuana joke, yes.
Yes.
The fact that I have to confirm that that's my
Oregon.
It was both a marijuana and a weather person joke?
Yeah.
Jesus Christ.
Wow. You like that, huh?
Now that takes talent right there, to roll them both into one.
Roll them both into one.
I like this guy.
Anyway, you know what? I mean, serious though, my wife and I have a dilemma on our hands right now because our favorite taco truck, we're really big on food carts out here in Oregon, and that's a big thing. And our favorite taco cart, it is located at what used to be like a nursery and like a farmer's market type store, and it is transitioning now to a marijuana store. And so, I'm still kind of wondering, do I want to be seen driving out of that thing have to explain? Honestly, I was just there for the tacos.
I was just there for the tacos.
That just might mean that the business for the tacos might take off.
Might take off. That's right.
I was going to say, I was just there for the tacos because I had the munchies.
Yeah, they said they're definitely staying. I don't know if they're hiring people or not, but yeah, they're definitely staying.
I bet.
That, so.
They'll just start taking over Girl Scout cookie sales.
That's right. We covered the Girl Scouts outside of the dispensary. Yeah. What was it like?
So back to your question about how did I get from
meteorology to security?
Yeah, that's a very fair question. You're not the first one to ask that for sure. And really that's a two-part answer. One is I had to get out of TV first and then had to get into InfoSec topics and learning about all that second. So first thing is my station that I worked for many years was sold a few years back. And a lot of times in TV stations, when they get purchased, they make a lot of changes. And so I got caught up in what I call a good old fashioned TV house cleaning. Mm-hmm. And so this is where they let my boss's boss, my boss, and, people across the organization go. And when my contract came up, they said, hey, we're ready to go in a different direction. So out I went after about 25 years on the air here in Portland for reporting first and then going back to meteorology school and doing that. So, then I was saying to myself, what do I want to do with the rest of my life? And I have a passion for telling stories. I always wanted to tell stories. And I also have a passion for collaboration with peers. And what I love about that is when I was chief meteorologist, every year I would go to, one of the meteorology conferences, a specific one that I like to go to. And there was nothing better than that week being with my peers, picking up on, what they were doing, the challenges we were all facing in the business, the competition that was coming on from smartphones and everybody's apps and all that stuff. And it was just really refreshing because you'd come away with a fresh perspective on what you did and why. So anyway, long story short, through some connections, I ended up at Gartner for a while, and I was facilitating collaboration, which I love. And it happened to be with the CISO group in Toronto, Canada. And I learned so much about InfoSec from them, all their struggles, the different things they were going through, their rise to prominence. I was watching as members of the group, who were, say, managers of information security. They became the organization's first name director of information security. And people who were directors were becoming the first name senior director or VP at their organization. And some were becoming the first ever named CISO at their organization. And so there was just a lot of momentum and a lot of excitement, and I got caught up in that. And SecureWorld needed somebody to be added to their journalism team because we do a lot of stories, a lot of daily content on our website, SecureWorldExpo.com. And I was all about that because now I get to combine my passion for technology, for collaboration, and also for storytelling all in one place. And one other thing that dovetails well between cybersecurity and my role as what you consider a mainstream journalist or meteorologist, so often in my newsroom stories, I was talking about good versus bad, right? I mean, a fire starts, maybe they're after the arsonist, and then the firefighters are protecting, the forest or the area. Somebody robs a bank, so there's a bad guy on the run, and yet police are trying to stop that person and arrest them before they crash their car into, unknowing people at an intersection. So it's this good versus bad kind of continuum. And I think a lot of that plays out as well in InfoSec. And from talking with so many experts and professionals in the field, I think and I'm sure I know you have, a lot of people love that thrill of trying to stop the bad guys from getting away with things, or if they do get away with it, finding out who they are, what their motive was, and then sharing that information with the community in a way that protects other parts of the community. So there's a lot of things that kind of dovetailed together. And here I am at SecureWorld out in Portland and loving it. So.
That's great. You interview a lot of people in our field, Bruce. Is that true?
I do. Yes, indeed.
So who are some of your favorite interviews and why?
Well, okay, yeah, that's a great question. There've been a lot of them because we have our company, our bread and butter is hosting 15 cybersecurity conferences around North America in the major cities. And so I travel to those, and I have the opportunity to interview everybody, from security architects to directors to managers to CISOs, VPs, everybody through the chain, and vendors, of course. And there's just so much information sharing that goes on. But my favorite, there are definitely some that stick out in my mind. I think when I talked out in the Bay Area at a SecureWorld Bay Area conference, I talked to Michael Duff, who's the CISO of Stanford University, and had a chance to interview him. And this was not too long after Equifax, and he was questioning, even before Equifax happened, why are we still using the Social Security number as an authenticator? I mean, how does it prove, Paul, that you're you, or my Social Security number proves that I'm me, especially digitally? And his argument is it doesn't. It's been compromised so often, right? It's basically worthless as that. So his thing was kind of, that a secret known by everyone is no longer a secret. And so he is in favor of some sort of public key encryption technology, which would involve various changing kind of factors. Nothing static, he says, because anything static is going to be useless, especially if you have to give the secret to authenticate yourself. That puts the secret at risk. So if you have to type in your Social Security number, or you have to type in a code, that puts that very thing at risk. That was his, idea of where things are coming from. So that was really interesting to hear his perspective on that.
It's not surprising, him being in education and universities, because back in the day, your student ID was your SSN for a large percentage of the schools here in the U.S. Thankfully, I think even early on, I mean, even 15 or maybe 15 years ago, almost 20 years ago, they started to get away from that, for obvious reasons.
Yeah. I remember being at a university when I was employed there, and the way they handled the problem of very much in the forefront of some of the schools there that were giving email addresses to every student on campus, and the way they solved that problem with namespace collisions, first initial, last name type of thing, was they did first initial, last four of your social.
Yep.
This is how I can remember my wife's Social Security number to this day, because her email address contained the last four of her social.
Oh, yikes.
Isn't that something?
Yeah.
Times have changed. So I guess already we were seeing the early signs that the Social Security number was not going to be useful forever if we're typing it in all the time.
So what are some other interesting people you've interviewed, Bruce?
Somebody else who comes to mind is James Beeson, who is the CISO of Cigna, and I interviewed him at SecureWorld in Dallas last year. And I actually made a list because he had things. He kind of mentioned 7 big changes, or 7 big kind of signposts, if you will, on what the attack surface is doing. And he listed these 7 things, and how we always think of it as just an attack, but the ramifications are so much bigger. First of all, he cited the Ukraine power grid disruption. And he said, when you leave 700,000 people without power in winter as a result of a cyber attack, I mean, that tells you that the infrastructure is vulnerable. Real life is potentially at stake. So that was interesting. Then he talked about how cybersecurity is kind of, in some ways, brought into question the security of the financial sector transfers with the SWIFT interbank hacks. And there's been a few opportunities where money's been directed incorrectly, wrong places through social engineering and things like that. The Yahoo breach, he said, we gave a lot of coverage to the Yahoo breach and how big it was and the actual numbers. But he pointed out that in the end, it actually decreased the value of Yahoo. So now you've got company valuations that are tied in with hacks and attacks. That's a significant change. And he went down the list of DDoS. I talked about fake news and how, some of the engineering through social media and using bots and technology like that helped, is trying to influence everything we do. And that's a risk. And then he also really was big on malware as a service as being a significant player going forward. And he really hinged all of this together in one thing, and he said it's really about income disparity around the world and the fact that there's so much connectivity now and more high-speed connectivity than ever before, including places where people are very, very poor. And that creates opportunity for criminals. And his example was in India, for example, he said the average salary is less than $2,000 per year. And he said, so let's just put it this way, and this is a quote from him. He said, if you're making $10 a day and you can make more using malware as a service or a syndicated crime syndicate, which those are growing as we know, if that offers you $20 a day to help penetrate networks, what are you going to do? And you put that in perspective. You're making $10 a day, but you can double your income. That could mean the difference between survival or not, right? And that is one of the things that he said that we're going to have to address. That income disparity is going to keep driving cybercrime. So that was interesting.
That's
other
profound.
people, Bruce, or other stories that you want to tell that you've been telling throughout your coverage for SecureWorld?
Yeah, I thought Sean Tuma, who's a cybersecurity attorney, interviewed him at one of our SecureWorld conferences, and the question came up: what is reasonable cybersecurity? Here we are in 2018, right? And you need to have quote unquote reasonable cybersecurity. The courts are going to be looking for it. The attorneys are going to be looking for it, assuming you have some sort of cyber incident. So what does that look like?
I'm sorry, Bruce. We got to go back. Sean Tuma.
Yes.
I'm interviewing him tomorrow, so you got to give me.
Are you serious?
Yeah, you got to
awesome.
give me like the juicy questions to ask Sean.
Oh, that is good. Okay, yeah, I'll email you right after the show. We'll get some good stuff going.
Perfect. Thank you.
Don't tell him I said that.
I
by
won't.
the way, this is not being broadcast, right?
Your secret is safe with us and all of the people listening and watching.
Yeah, that's what I was afraid of. Exactly. So Sean, you can ask him about this tomorrow. I won't steal all his thunder, but about reasonable cybersecurity. His big thing was, first of all, it's defined by your company itself. Your version of what reasonable cybersecurity looks like is going to be different in your industry or your particular company than in a different industry or perhaps at a different company. And so you start by doing a risk assessment and kind of looking at that. But I think he had some good news in here in the interview that I did with him, because he said, you have to prioritize things, right? You can't do everything at once necessarily as you continue to mature your security program. So what do you do? And he said, you prioritize. And that way, you said, the courts don't expect you to do everything all at once. They're going to look and say, okay, were you continuing to mature the program? And especially in those key areas where your risk was greatest, were you addressing those? And he said, you kind of go back to grade school. And I thought this was an interesting comparison. He said, you have to be able to show your work. You have to be able to document and prove that you took all the steps you could, even if they weren't quite good enough, but you took all the steps you could to secure your organization. So that applies to everybody on the team, and I thought that was really, really interesting to hear what he had to say. And one other thing that he said, ask him about this too tomorrow. He said the temperament of the person that you have in charge of incident response will often decide how successful and effective your incident response is. So, Paul, because what would you say your temperament is?
Depends on any given day. That could change.
That might be a problem.
Depends on the urgency of the situation.
Yeah, I guess if your temperament is erratic, that's probably bad for incident response.
He's
exactly
a very
what
angry man.
He said if you've got somebody who's like a panic type person, and he said incident response, it's like catastrophic, or at least it feels that way, that pressure, because he deals with a lot of clients who have to go through this. And he said, if you have somebody who's just totally erratic and a nervous Nelly, you're in trouble. And on the other hand, you might have somebody say, yeah, I know we got breach. Yeah, we're gonna do this.
That.
I got a lot of things to do, so I'm trying. He said that's not going to work either. You need somebody right in the middle. So just really some great insights from people I've been able to interview. One other thing that I thought was really good, when we talked to, I interviewed the CISO of U.S. Bank, Jason Whitty, and that was at the Twin Cities SecureWorld. And, he was talking about, he thinks that InfoSec has gone beyond being just about securing the data or information. And he really is talking about the Internet of Medical Things. And And he said, now it's become about protecting people's lives. So when you put it in that kind of perspective, if you're an InfoSec, just in general, I mean, you're a difference maker, right? You have the opportunity to secure the data or information, your company, and also, possibly people's lives. That's pretty cool stuff.
And I'd argue to that, maybe even expand on that a little bit. It's not about necessarily protecting their lives from a medical standpoint. That you have the ability to potentially make or break a person based on data loss or data acquisition. Or any of that type of stuff. That to quote one of our favorite movies, Paul, it's all about the information model. It's all about the information and the information that you have and how it gets used. What should it get compromised and so forth.
Yeah, you're absolutely right about that. And speaking of that, I know today one of the stories I wrote about Philips in the medical IoT U.S. CERT had an alert. They're working on like 36 vulnerabilities right now with some of their advanced medical imaging equipment. And what was interesting about that particular alert, it had some words in there that nobody in InfoSec wants to hear, and that is that someone with low skill, a hacker with low skills, could exploit those vulnerabilities. And one of those things was the ability to access sensitive information like, medical records. And another one was a man-in-the-middle attacks possibility, remote code execution. I mean, there's so many different ways that, things can be exploited, as we know. So that was an interesting story today.
Did you say that, Bruce? And, Larry, obviously we've been covering...
I thought you were going to go with our low skill. But
no, that too. But, we've been covering embedded devices and IoT since the beginning of the show, essentially. I mean, a lot of our early coverage was centered on wireless, which was really an embedded system that's inside of your computer, essentially. Yeah. But
and then printers, and the list goes on.
And so I kind of struggle for like new and fresh content when it comes to IoT device security, because it seems to be like the same old broken record. But I was actually talking to Faro Mavatuna from NetSparker, and I asked him the IoT question. Now, he runs a company that does web application scanning. And he said, really one of the problems, and again, from his perspective, assessing the web applications that we use to manage maybe some of the Philips machines and other IoT devices, he said it's web applications that aren't built by web application people. They're built by people who are building these specialized devices. They're not web application specialists. He goes, a lot of the times we can't really assess the security of the application because it's not built anything close to what a traditional or modern web application looks like. The web server is built from the ground up from C or C++, and the various components are very specially coded on the device by people who are not really doing web application development on a daily basis. It's just one of the tasks they have to do. And I'm like, well, that really explains a lot, and something I hadn't heard before.
Yeah, that's a very interesting perspective, and I think that's true. I've heard similar thoughts along those lines, and kind of going with that, the question, the thing that's still amazing to me is we continue to launch shiny new IoT objects that we can't wait to get our hands on without security baked in. And I there's some indication that's changing, but it seems like so often it's not. And I have to wonder about a story I wrote about on SecureWorldExpo.com this week. I don't know if you guys heard that California has given the green light, or will on April 2nd, for fully autonomous vehicles to run by themselves, only controlled by tech on a test basis. And right now they're doing autonomous vehicles, but there's somebody in the vehicle as a backup. That's going to end April 2nd. And each vehicle has to have $5 million worth of insurance that it carries. So that was interesting. But the other question is, what about cybersecurity as we're, rolling out these, autonomous autos, maybe sooner than any of us had imagined?
I used to think
what do you think about that?
I used to think that this was really cool, like all this technology stuff, and I'm like, yeah, there might be security vulnerabilities, but we'll survive. And then I started watching Black Mirror, and I'm like, wow, technology's bad. Like, I'm unplugging from everything. And speaking of autonomous vehicles, there is an episode, and it doesn't really spoil the episode if I tell you this part, which is cool. The autonomous vehicle actually hits someone, doesn't run them over and kill them, but hits them and injures them pretty severely. And for that reason, I'm just highly skeptical about autonomous vehicles in California.
And I think from the autonomous vehicle perspective, these are some higher level folks that understand a lot of these types of things. But in so many cases, over the years, you and I, Paul, have done this, and even me recently, it was going into an assessment for an embedded type device, an IoT device, you name it. And we start talking about some of the cases in which we're looking to do some attacks. And we get questions from the engineers like, well, why would you do that? And my answer is,
why wouldn't
because
you do
I
that?
can.
Yeah. You know what's interesting, though, to come full circle from the start of our interview, the autonomous vehicle in Black Mirror is not a transportation device. It's actually a pizza delivery service. And it's not like you have to order the pizza. Like, you can walk up to this vehicle, autonomous vehicle, and put your payment in, or I think they use their smartphone because it's set in the future, right? Not that we don't have that technology today, but like they pull out like the thinnest looking smartphone I've ever seen in my entire life, and they put it up to the machine, and like out comes a pizza. So I'm sure in California that will be also popular.
Oh, well, you know what? I mean, and you know who announced they're working on that? Pizza Hut announced they are actually working on an autonomous pizza vehicle. And you think about it, what if you could have one in every neighborhood that's just like sitting at the bottom of the hill or whatever, and you type it up and it's like, be there in 5 minutes, bring your smartphone out. That would be incredible.
Automatically follows you home from the dispensary because your phone knows where the location is. To bring it full
only
circle.
In certain states.
In approximately 47 minutes, they're going to want a pizza.
Only in California, Washington,
maybe
and Oregon, right?
Yeah.
Just parked. Parked outside the dispensary might be more like it.
Right, right.
But another thing that I am really excited about is we have our flagship SecureWorld conference coming up that you mentioned. Coming up in Boston.
It's awesome. March 14th through 16th. Did I get that right?
Yeah, the 14th and the 15th. It's a 2-day conference. Yep. And I know you're going to be there. You're going to be there broadcasting, which will be great. And you were there last year, and I mean, you had a huge crowd. So apparently, despite the rumors of the contrary, you're pretty popular.
Well, Paul's famous on the internet.
The secret that we don't really like to disclose while we're at the conference is that we had bourbon in the booth, and that's why there was a big crowd, because we were giving it away to people.
And now it comes to the surface.
Yes.
I thought it was the quality content.
No,
it was the quality content inside the bourbon bottle.
It was free booze.
Gee, that works in InfoSec conference? I had no idea.
Oh no! In all seriousness, I love going to SecureWorld. Bruce, I wanted to ask you. I like catching up with the vendors, partly because that's part of my job here at Security Weekly. Is kind of that analyst role that I get to know the vendors, I get to know what they do, I get to know the people that work there, and collect all that information to distill it down for our audience. And I try and do the best job I can, of course, with thousands of security vendors constantly changing all of the time and new startups coming in. It's a daunting task. So it's nice for me to go to, and I'm sure for others as well that are in the industry, to go to a place where they can spend some quality time with vendors in the vendor area. We also do interviews, with people in our booth. We do some trivia questions. We do some general security questions as we have been doing. You can find last year's actually on our YouTube channel and check them out. We'll be doing another series of that coming up. And it seems to me, Bruce, that SecureWorld, of all the choices of conferences that we have today, from all of the cons that we go to, SecureWorld is very vendor focused. And why is that, and what's some of the value in kind of being a little more vendor focused than some of the other community shows?
Yeah, well, I mean, there's no question. Like for in Boston, I mean, we will have 2 conference halls. There's it's at the Heinz Convention Center, but there's 3 halls there. We'll have 2 of them, and it'll be packed out. More than 1,000 people will be attending. And yes, there is quite a vendor footprint. And quite honestly, our attendees have told us this is valuable for them to find out what's new and what's next. Because in addition to having the top vendor companies in the country in InfoSec there. So you can, network with them, connect with maybe your salesperson that you've been meaning to call or whatever. There's also, emerging providers who are there and names that you haven't heard. And a lot of folks in InfoSec are looking for what's new and what's next. But I was thinking back, we talked about James Beeson earlier from CISO, and one of the things that he listed in the reasons he likes to come to SecureWorld, first he said, of course, the collaboration and the chance to be with peers, and just that idea of, oh, I tried this, you tried that, okay, yeah, how'd that work? That kind of thing. But he also said that he loves the fact that there's so many vendors in a concentrated space, because he said, I don't have to have an hour meeting with each one of them. Instead, right, I'm able to save my time and theirs, and I can have a 10-minute conversation with somebody and figure out, is this a technology that we might be interested in and we need to explore more? So there's a lot of those conversations that go on. And I've had more than one executive tell me they actually like talking to the sales engineers who are also on the vendor floor, because they know the technology so much and they can really speak the same language. And so those are a couple of the reasons that I think, that's so popular. But we also have, I just thinking about our keynotes this year, Thornton May is one of the keynotes. I don't know.
I was going to ask you, Bruce, who you're looking forward to, because I know you're really excited about Thornton.
Yes, he is a live wire. Okay, he is just awesome, and he calls himself an empirical futurist. And while I'm still not exactly sure what that is, I can tell you that Thornton was a futurist before everybody on every speaking venue was a futurist. He really is one, and he's always looking forward based on what's empirically happening now. And he goes 1,000,000 miles a minute. And I'm telling you, during the opening keynote, and he opens the show on the morning of the 14th, by the end of that, you will have a paradigm shift on your role in InfoSec, because he's that good, and he just makes you think in a way, it just kind of blows your mind, and it's a great start to the conference. And what was so funny is at SecureWorld Charlotte, he actually was speaking in Charlotte just a couple of weeks ago, and watching him interact with all these InfoSec professionals. And next thing you know, they are wanting to share information on, in this huge conference ballroom. And it just was something else. I'm really excited about Thornton. Another really exciting keynote is kicking off the morning of the 15th, and that's Dr. Larry Poneman from the Poneman Institute. And he has some fresh research from 184 companies, where he is taking a look at InfoSec leadership and the changing role of the CISO. And I don't know everything he's going to say, but I've seen some of his bullet points about some of the changes. And one of them is really good news for InfoSec leaders, is that other parts of the business are starting to carry the risk. So it's not just the InfoSec team. That is a big change. And he's also seeing that InfoSec leaders who are successful are coming from different backgrounds than ever before, oftentimes business, not just security, and that many times now the leaders in InfoSec are actually shifting into more of a coaching role, where they're coaching the rest of the business on how to stay secure. So he's got a lot of fresh research. So there's all kinds of things. And Thomas Stempak, who's the CISO at Leahy Health, he's talking about third-party risk. That's been a topic that just doesn't quit. In fact, even today, I don't know if you guys saw the news that Capital One had a vendor that accidentally placed Capital One employee credentials into an unsecured S3 bucket. Stop me if you've seen this movie before.
Yeah.
but it didn't involve S3 buckets, but still, it was still out there. Yeah,
and there's actually an entire category in security that I'm sure has been there for some time, but really kind of exploded recently in helping companies assess that third-party risk. We've interviewed a couple, I think, on Business Security Weekly. So
I think we need to get Jack and see that Poneman talk.
Yes. Jack Daniel?
There's a joke there somewhere.
There is. Yeah, because I remember him talking.
Who is Jack?
Yeah, because Jack was talking with the Poneman. There was a Poneman breach, right? Poneman got breached or something a while back, or something like that. I don't, Jack.
I don't remember that, but I can't say it never happened, I guess. But
Jack has very
I
strong.
Didn't cover it.
Yeah, very strong.
Jack is very opinionated for his age.
Resident curmudgeon. So,
yes.
Bruce, I just have 5 final questions for you, and wanted to ask you first, before we get into the 5 questions, are you ready to play 5 questions with Security Weekly? That's not one of the questions, otherwise there'd be 6.
Yes, I mean, I'm as ready as I'm gonna be. Let's put it that way.
That's good. We didn't prep you for the 5 questions,
which is
intentional.
I
have no knowledge of this.
Okay, good. That's the way we like it. All right, ready? 3 words to describe yourself.
Optimistic, fun, and a little weird.
If you were a serial killer, what would be your weapon of choice?
Weather facts.
Not a weather fax.
Weather balloon.
You know what? I'm going to go with computer, and I'm going to tell you why. Is that I think that is part of the future of where cybercrime and physical crime meet in the future. So let's go with computer.
Have you watched Black Mirror?
I have not seen that, actually. Now that I hear you talk about it, I want to see it.
Now that you've said that, you definitely have to watch it, because that's what a lot of the episodes are about, pretty much.
Awesome. I'll check it out.
If you wrote a book about yourself, what would the title be?
Something about the weather. So, yeah, actually, that's it. Something about the weather with a chance of cybersecurity. How about that?
In the popular game of Ask Grabby Grabby, do you prefer to go first or second?
I don't think my HR department will let me answer that question.
It's the easiest question, Bruce. It's multiple choice, and there's only 2 possibilities.
And you can't get it wrong.
And you can't get it wrong.
I have to go second, then. That's
okay.
At least
there
more
you go.
legal,
Perfect.
but anyway.
Perfect.
Bruce, choose 2 celebrities to be your parents.
Alive, dead, fictional, or otherwise.
Oh, geez. Let's see. Sandra Bullock.
All right.
Yes.
Okay, that'd be a good choice, right?
Is that because she was in the net? It's okay. There's no right or wrong answer, but
it's a good hacker movie nonetheless.
That's good. And how about Morgan Freeman? Because I love his voice.
Oh,
it's very cool.
Can I say it?
Yes.
Titty sprinkles.
Is that from some meme or something? I swear, I didn't know what he was going to say.
But you said yes anyway.
I said yes anyway, just because I didn't want to hurt Larry's feelings. And
so there's this whole thing about now Morgan Freeman has this luscious voice, and you know what? There you go.
So SecureWorldExpo.com, Bruce, is where you're posting. Now, is it videos, blog posts, both, combination?
Yeah, absolutely. It's all of the above. I do video interviews with all the experts at all of our conferences, and I post them online, and I write stories about them around the topics that are hot right now. So I'm excited to do that. And yes, SecureWorldExpo.com. And if you want more information on the 14th annual Secure World in Boston, just click the events page, and you can also find information on the other 15 cybersecurity conferences we have around the U.S.
Fantastic, Bruce. Thank you so much for appearing on Paul's Security Weekly. With that, we're going to take a short break and come back with the security news, so stay tuned.